I told you 3 times. Your bag needs to be under the seat and your phone off. This is not optional.
I didn't mean any trouble. I was just checking
You're defying
a message.
safety instructions. One more word and I'll have you removed. Do you understand me?
Yes, I understand.
Hey, Blackie, go to the last seat. You don't belong in first class. The words weren't whispered. They were tossed at her like trash, echoing down the aisle as heads turned and silence fell. Ava felt every stare, every smirk, every quiet approval from those who thought she would shrink. But she didn't move, not yet. Because while they saw a woman they believed they could humiliate, they had no idea who she truly was, or the power she carried behind that tablet in her hands. This is the story of the flight crew who crossed the wrong woman. Ava Morgan had flown more miles in a year than most people managed in a decade. As a senior operations strategist for one of the nation's biggest airlines, traveling wasn't just part of her job. It was the pulse of her life. Airports felt familiar, almost comforting, like a second home built from polished floors, distant announcements, in the quiet hum of people moving towards somewhere new. To most passengers, she looked like any other business traveler, simple sweater, neatly braided hair, tablet tucked under her arm. What they didn't see were the years she had spent navigating corporate politics, the late nights preparing presentations, or the meetings where her voice had been ignored until her ideas were repeated by someone else. She learned to excel quietly, letting her work speak louder than her presence. In overtime, her quiet excellence carried her higher than anyone expected. Still, despite all her accomplishments, Ava didn't live a life free of reminders. Reminders that no matter how high she climbed, some people still saw her through a smaller, narrower lens. She had gotten used to the stares in airport lounges, the cautious tone from workers who assumed she didn't belong in the priority line, the subtle shifts in attitude once they realized her status matched or exceeded theirs. But on this particular morning, she wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about her meeting, one that would determine significant staffing changes across several airline hubs. Her recommendations were important enough that the board requested her presence in person. She felt ready, calm, focused. Another flight, another mission. The boarding area buzzed with routine chatter. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing hinted at the storm ahead. Yet, as she approached the gate, she noticed a slight pause in the agent's expression. A flicker. A moment of calculation. It was subtle enough that most people wouldn't have caught it. But Ava had lived long enough to recognize the signs. She brushed it off and stepped onto the jet bridge, unaware that this flight, this crew, and this seemingly ordinary moment would become a test far bigger than any meeting waiting at the other end. Ava stepped onto the aircraft expecting the usual nod from the attendants, the routine welcome, the familiar efficiency of people who worked the skies every day. Instead, she met stiff smiles, tight, practiced, and uneasy, the kind of smiles that weren't meant to welcome, but to warn. One flight attendant glanced at her ticket, then at her seat assignment near the front. His jaw tightened, and he exchanged a look with another crew member. Not friendly, not neutral. Something colder. Ava felt it immediately. A shift in atmosphere, subtle but unmistakable. She had thought it in boardrooms, in first-class lounges, in neighborhoods where her success drew skepticism instead of respect. That same silent judgment now hovered in the aisle, wrapping around her like static. The attendant cleared his throat and placed a hand on her arm. Not gently, not rudely, but with an authority he hadn't earned. He told her there had been a seating adjustment. His tone suggested finality, not explanation. When Ava asked why, his eyes hardened just slightly, the kind of hardening that carried an unspoken message. People like you don't question people like us. Passengers glanced up. Some curious, some uncomfortable, some pretend not to notice at all. He gestured toward the back of the plane, the very last row. The row was the one no one requested unless they had no other choice. She watched him lie without hesitation, insisting her original seat had a technical issue, even as another passenger who had checked in after her was guided directly into it. A familiar sting pressed against her chest. Not shocked, not confusion, just the heavy disappointment that came from recognizing an old pattern wearing a new uniform. Ava moved down the aisle, her steps steady, each one punctuated by the murmurs of those who saw but didn't speak. She passed row after row until the cabin felt narrower, dimmer, more isolated. The last row waited for her, cramped, loud, inches from the lavatory door. She sat slowly, intentionally, not defeated, but observing, calculating. The attendants whispered up front, glancing back at her as if she were a problem successfully tucked away, but they didn't know who she was. They didn't see the role she played in decisions far above their pay grade. They didn't think she was traveling to finalize a board presentation that would influence hiring, training, and disciplinary policies across the entire fleet. Ava opened her tablet. Its screen lit her face with a soft glow, calm against the rising storm around her. She navigated through her files, then to a secure portal accessible only to top-level executives and board-affiliated analysts. The airline's logo filled the screen, large, unmistakable. Someone gasped. The whispering stopped. From the front of the plane, the lead flight attendant stiffened. His eyes widened as he recognized the interface, the confidential modules, the unmistakable board-level access. One by one, crew members froze, their confidence draining like color from their faces. Because in that single moment, they realized the truth. The woman they had pushed to the last row wasn't just a passenger. She was someone who had the power to determine their future, and she had just taken out her pen, figuratively and literally. The tension in the cabin thickened, coiling tighter with every passing second. Something big was coming, something none of them were prepared for. The cabin seemed to shrink as Ava's fingers moved across her tablet, steady, deliberate, unmistakably authoritative. The crew watched her from the front, like observers at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to step forward or run. Every tap on her screen felt like a countdown they couldn't stop, each second tightening the air around them. The lead attendant finally approached, his steps stiff, his confidence visibly unraveling. He tried to regain control with a strained smile, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. Before he could speak, Ava's screen refreshed, displaying a secure internal communication channel only accessible to the highest levels of leadership. The captain's intercom chimed overhead. His voice trembled slightly as he requested the lead attendant to report to the cockpit immediately. Passengers glanced around, sensing something unusual, their curiosity rising with the tension. As he walked away, Ava watched a message populate on her screen, directly from the board liaison she had been scheduled to meet after landing. He had seen her activity. He had seen the flag she triggered. And now he wanted details. Ava typed a concise summary. Discriminatory behavior, seat reassignment without cause, and targeted treatment witnessed by multiple passengers. Her words were precise, but carried the weight of someone who had endured this too many times and refused to let it pass again. When the captain and attendant returned, their faces were pale. They stopped beside her seat, no longer authoritative, no longer confident. Just afraid, because now they understood. This wasn't a report, this was a reckoning. The remainder of the flight unfolded in uneasy silence. The attendants who once wore forced smiles now moved with caution, every gesture measured, every glance tinged with dread. Passengers sensed the shift, though few understood the cause. Ava remained composed in the final row, her tablet closed, her posture calm, a striking contrast to the chaos rippling quietly through the crew. When the plane landed, the captain requested all passengers to remain seated. His voice lacked the authority he had earlier. Two airline supervisors stepped aboard, their expressions serious, their eyes scanning the cabin before they approached Ava. They asked her, respectfully, almost reverently, to disembark first. The crew watched, their faces tense, as she rose and walked past them without a word. Outside the jet bridge, away from the cabin's stifling air, the supervisors apologized, not with empty corporate scripts, but with genuine, shaken voices. An internal review would begin immediately. The crew's fate, and the fate of those who had enabled this behavior for years, now rested in a system Ava had spent her career trying to improve. But even as justice moved forward, Ava knew this moment represented something larger. This wasn't about a seat change, or a single crew, or even her position within the company. It was about the countless travelers who had been pushed aside quietly, dismissed silently, and made to feel small for simply existing in spaces they had every right to be in. As she walked toward the terminal's exit, she wondered how many flights like this had gone unchallenged, and how many more would it take before the world finally refused to look away.